Some places hold on to memories. But what if those memories are of a crime too brutal to forget? In Chicago's Argent Tower, the 24th floor hides the Siren Suite, empty for years. They say one night inside will kill you or drive you mad. Tonight, I'm finding out which.
In the concrete and steel heart of Chicago, where skyscrapers clawed at the perpetually overcast sky, stood the Argent Tower. It was a monument to wealth and modern architecture, famous throughout the city. But its fame was eclipsed by a more sinister notoriety, a story whispered by doormen and gossiped about in rival high-rises. This story centered on a single residence on its highest floor, apartment 2402, known to those who dared speak of it as the Siren's Suite.
The legend was grimly simple. Anyone, regardless of their courage or skepticism, who spent a single night within the walls of 2402 would be broken by sunrise. They would either be found dead or irrevocably insane, trapped in a state of perpetual, screaming terror. This wasn't just an urban legend. It had precedent. Two previous owners, both wealthy and stable individuals, had descended into madness shortly after moving in. Their descents so swift and total that they became cautionary tales.
Consequently, a palpable fear radiated from 2402, poisoning the entire 24th floor. Families living in the adjacent multi-million-dollar condos fled, spooked by the whispers and the unsettling silence that emanated from their neighbor's door. For years, the entire floor remained a ghost level. An entire stratum of prime real estate surrendered to fear. Even when the prices for these abandoned suites were slashed to less than half their market value, no one dared to make an offer. The rest of the Argent, from the 23rd floor down, buzzed with the life of the city's elite, but the 24th floor was a dead zone.
Over the years, the lore of apartment 2402 festered and grew, branching into ever more gruesome variations. One popular version told of a pair of lovers. In a fit of jealous rage, the man murdered his girlfriend, cradling her lifeless body for more than a day before taking his own life. Their spirits, it was said, were now eternally bound to the apartment, their violent end replaying in a silent, endless loop, causing the lights to flicker and die. Another, more grotesque tale claimed the man had dismembered his lover, and that her headless spirit now roamed the 24th floor corridor, searching.
These stories, amplified by thrill seekers who would sneak into the building to try and catch a glimpse of the phantom, were a migraine for the building's management. The Argent's reputation was being tarnished, its pristine image stained by a ghost story. Desperate, the building manager devised a bold, if not reckless, solution. They would monetize the myth. For a fee of $500, curious thrill seekers and paranormal enthusiasts could rent apartment 2402 for one night. A waiver was involved, of course.
This was an irresistible proposition for Caleb, a vlogger whose channel Unseen Realities was dedicated to exploring the strange and debunking the unexplainable. Caleb saw this as the ultimate content opportunity. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in mass hysteria, environmental factors, and the power of suggestion. After wiring the fee and signing a digital contract that absolved the Argent of any and all liability, he packed a suitcase full of clothes and a Pelican case brimming with camera gear. The video title was already locked in his mind: 24 Hours in America's Most Haunted Apartment. He was convinced it would go viral.
With his luggage in tow, Caleb stepped across the threshold of the infamous apartment. The air inside was still and cold, heavy with the scent of industrial cleaner and something else, something old. It was a spacious two-bedroomed unit with a stunning view of the glittering urban sprawl. The rooms were immaculate,
professionally cleaned and staged.
The living room featured a large black leather sofa, its surface cracked with age. The kitchen was fully stocked with essentials, a courtesy for their morbidly curious guest. Caleb was genuinely impressed. If I can get through one night here without any issues, he thought, a flicker of genuine interest passing through him. Hell, I might just make an offer on this place. What a story that would be.
Suddenly, a soft but firm knock echoed from the front door. Thump, thump, thump. Caleb was surprised. The manager had assured him the entire floor was vacant. He walked to the door and swung it open.
Standing in the hallway was a young woman of breathtaking beauty. "Hi," she said, her voice soft as silk. "You must be the new resident. I'm down at the end of the hall. It's so nice to finally have a neighbor again." She smiled, and the expression, though lovely, didn't quite reach her dark, sorrowful eyes. "Oh, wow. I thought, I was told this whole floor was empty," Caleb replied, momentarily flustered.
It's all just rumors, she said, with a dismissive little wave of her hand. It was empty for a while, I guess, but I moved in about a month ago. It's been quiet. She paused. Well, it was great to meet you. Yeah, you too. It's great to know I'm not totally alone up here, Caleb said, his confidence returning. Hey, would you like to come in for a minute?
"Oh, no, I can't. I was just heading out," she replied, her voice seeming to come from a little further away than he expected. "I just saw you moving in and wanted to say hello. Here." She extended a small basket of fruit, a welcome gift. Before he could properly thank her, she turned and glided down the hallway toward the elevators. Caleb, feeling a sudden surge of cheerful energy, stepped back inside, the fruit basket in his hand. He didn't notice that the woman seemed to vanish just before reaching the elevators, whose doors had not yet opened.
His spirit soared. A gorgeous neighbor. The building management had failed to mention that little detail. So much for the terrifying legends. This was turning out better than he could have imagined. Maybe she could be a key character in his video. Her beauty was captivating, a delicate, mysterious quality that had struck him from the first glance. Humming to himself, Caleb began methodically setting up his gear. He was a professional. He placed 2 cameras in the living room, capturing the entrance and the main seating area. 2 more went into the master bedroom, and a final one in the kitchen. Every angle would be covered, every moment of his stay documented. He was certain this video would not only be a hit, but would also definitively put the silly rumors about this place to rest. With all the cameras recording, he settled onto the sofa with a cup of coffee, the basket of fruit sitting on the table before him. He suddenly slapped his own forehead, a sharp thwack that echoed in the quiet room. "Idiot!" he chastised himself. In his starstruck state, he had forgotten to ask for her name or her number. It was then that he heard it, a sound from the hallway, a thin, wailing cry like a distressed infant. It was a sound so full of misery it made the hair on his arms stand up. Caleb froze, his heart giving a sudden lurch. He put his mug down. It was only 3 p.m., the sky outside still a bright, flat gray. Surely, even if ghosts were real, they wouldn't start their haunting in broad daylight. He opened the door and peered out. The hallway was pitch black. A moment ago, the recessed ceiling lights had cast a clean white glow. Now they were all dead. A cold knot of unease tightened in his stomach. Then he saw them. 2 luminous green dots at the far end of the hall, glowing like embers. They were moving toward him, fast. A black cat, sleek and silent as a wraith, shot past him.
a blur of shadow and malevolent green light. Caleb yelped, stumbling backward. The cat darted toward the fire escape door at the end of the corridor and vanished through the gap at the bottom, leaving only silence in its wake. What the hell? Caleb muttered, his heart hammering against his ribs. Whose cat is that? This was a luxury high-rise. Pets weren't supposed to roam the halls freely. And the lights.
He pulled out his phone and called building security, his voice sharper than he intended as he complained about the power outage in the hall and the stray cat. About 30 minutes later, 2 electricians arrived. Caleb immediately launched into a complaint about the cat. "Sir," one of the electricians said flatly, "this building has a strict no pets policy. There are no cats here." But he promised to inform management. After confirming the hallway lights were working again, they left as quickly as they had come.
An idea sparked in Caleb's mind. The most interesting phenomena weren't happening inside the apartment, but out here. He grabbed one of his spare cameras and placed it on the floor of the hallway, aiming it down the long, sterile corridor. Satisfied, he went back inside, stretched out on the sofa, and decided to wait for nightfall. He planned to take a short nap, to be fresh and alert for whatever the witching hour might bring. In his heart, he still believed it was all a fabrication, a scheme by someone to drive down real estate prices. He was just drifting off when the sound returned, that blood-curdling, infant-like cry, but this time it was louder, closer. It was coming from inside the apartment. Caleb's eyes flew open. The black cat shot out from the shadows of the kitchen and leapt onto the coffee table, turning to face him. It let out a horrifying hiss, its eyes glowing like flashlights. Disoriented and angry, Caleb grabbed a decorative walking stick left by the door and swung it wildly at the creature. It connected with the cat's leg with a sickening crack. The animal shrieked in pain, a truly agonizing sound, before scrambling off the table and bolting out the still open door. A wave of regret washed over Caleb. The cat had looked filthy, its fur matted and clumped. It looked more like a stray than a pet. He reasoned it must have belonged to a former tenant on the 24th floor, abandoned when its owners fled in fear. He felt a pang of guilt for injuring it, but he also wondered, how did it get in? And where was his beautiful neighbor? Surely she must be feeding it. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a strange sense of responsibility, he ventured back into the hallway, heading toward the apartment at the far end where the woman had said she lived. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered violently, bathing the corridor in a nauseating strobe effect. Every door was shut tight, their surfaces coated in a thick, undisturbed layer of dust. A hiss from behind made him spin around. The black cat was there, its eyes burning with fury. But Caleb's gasp of shock wasn't for the cat. The beautiful woman from before was standing right in front of him, so close he could feel an unnatural cold radiating from her. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Why?" she whispered, her voice no longer soft, but a venomous rasp that echoed from the walls. "Did you hurt my pet?" "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "I will kill you." She lunged, her hands clamping around his throat. The grip was like iron. It was impossibly strong, cutting off his air instantly. His face flushed, the world turning into a roaring gray tunnel. Primal survival instinct screamed at him to fight back, to tear her hands away, but his own arms felt as if they were bound by invisible chains, heavy and useless at his sides. Panic gave him one last surge of strength. He kicked out wildly with his leg, his foot connecting squarely with her chest. The result was not what he expected. Her entire body, head, torso, arms, and legs shattered and fell away like pieces of a broken mannequin. Her head landed on the carpet by his feet with a soft thud, its eyes still staring up at him with bottomless hate. Blood, thick and black, fountained from the stump of her neck, spattering across his face. But the hands were still there, disembodied and impossibly strong, still crushing his windpipe.
The horrific, impossible sight overloaded his senses. A scream died in his throat, unable to escape the crushing grip. The hallway dissolved into a swirl of blackness. His last conscious thought was the cold, wet feeling of her blood on his skin as his eyes rolled back and the world went silent. Caleb awoke to a gentle voice calling his name. He was lying on the cold, polished floor of the hallway. He blinked, his vision swimming back into focus. A woman knelt beside him. She had short blonde hair and a kind, concerned face that radiated a strange sense of peace. For a terrifying moment, his mind flashed back to the dismembered horror, and he flinched violently, scrambling backward on his hands and feet like a crab.
"It's okay," the woman said, her voice calm and steady. "I found you out here. Are you all right?" What are you?" Caleb stammered, his body trembling uncontrollably. He looked around wildly. The hallway was clean. The blood, the severed head, the gruesome hands, all gone. It was as if it never happened. Are you one of them?" "My name is Seraphina. I'm from the apartment at the end of the hall, the one you were just at. I saw what happened. You must be Caleb." "How do you know my name?" he asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "I heard the electricians earlier. They mentioned your name. You looked so afraid of the stories. I'm surprised to see you here." Her smile was genuine, but tinged with a profound sadness. "Do you want to come inside, out of the hallway?" He hesitated, every instinct screaming at him to run. He pushed himself to his feet, his legs unsteady. His eyes fell on the GoPro he had set up in the corridor. He snatched it up, his fingers fumbling with the buttons. He had to see. He had to know if he was going crazy. He brought it back with him as he warily followed Seraphina, who walked with a lightness that barely seemed to touch the floor. The lack of footsteps sent a fresh wave of ice through his veins. Back inside the oppressive silence of 2402, the sky outside was darkening, the city lights beginning to paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The sight was beautiful, but it offered Caleb no comfort. Seraphina stood by the large window, a translucent figure against the dying light.
"You bought this apartment, then?"
she asked, her voice a murmur.
"You're not afraid of the ghosts?"
"Ghosts," Caleb scoffed, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. Then his bravado crumbled. "Someone just told me they were going to kill me. That thing." "That was because you hurt her cat," Seraphina said, a statement of fact, not accusation. "You just saw a terrible vision. It was meant to scare you away. Now you're not scared anymore?" Suddenly, a choked gurgling sound came from the corner of the room. Caleb spun around. It was the first woman, Ilara. She was standing there, pristine and beautiful as before. And then, with a wet, snapping sound, her head lolled to the side and dropped from her shoulders, thudding onto the expensive rug. Blood pulsed from her neck, staining the front of her white dress a brilliant, horrifying crimson. The sight was so viscerally wrong, so utterly nightmarish, that Caleb's mind simply broke. He didn't scream. He threw a nearby chair at the apparition. The chair sailed straight through her, as if she were smoke, and crashed into the wall. He scrambled for the door, his only thought to escape, to get out of this cursed place. He pulled and yanked at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was sealed, as if welded shut. He kicked at the solid wood, shouting for help, his voice raw with terror.
He could hear movement behind him. Serafina was calmly picking up the severed head and placing it back on Alara's neck. The headless body then floated into the air, turning and swooping directly towards him. Caleb grabbed the first thing he could find, one of his heavy cameras on a tripod, and hurled it at the approaching phantom. The camera missed, smashing the glass coffee table with an explosive shatter.
The sound of breaking glass seemed to momentarily stun the spirit. In that instant, the front door flew open on its own. Caleb didn't hesitate. He bolted into the hallway, which was now dark as a tomb. At the far end, the black cat reappeared. It let out a demonic yowl, and its eyes, once green, now glowed a deep, hellish red. It charged.
Fear gave way to a primal, instinctual terror. Caleb stumbled backward, falling to the floor. Behind him, the door to 2402 swung open again, light spilling out. Trapped between the demonic cat and the horrors within, he made a split-second choice. He scrambled back inside 2402 and slammed the door shut. Instantly, the apartment returned to normal. The lights were steady. The air was still. The ghost of Alara was gone. Caleb looked down at his jeans. A dark, wet patch had spread across the front. He had been so terrified, he'd lost control of his bladder. A hot flush of shame washed over him, but it was quickly replaced by a chilling realization. It was the fear itself. The sheer, abject terror was what they used, what they fed on. He knew the stories were real now. The handprints, faint but dark, were bruised onto the skin of his neck. He had to get out. He grabbed for his phone to call for help, but the screen was black. The battery was completely drained. The door was sealed again, an immovable barrier of supernatural force.
A girl's voice, layered and echoing, filled the room. "Stay and play with us. We're so lonely here." A strange calm fell over Caleb. If he couldn't escape, he had to face it. He wasn't a victim in a horror movie. He was an investigator. He took a deep, shuddering breath, went into the bathroom to change, and then walked back out to the living room sofa and sat down. He closed his eyes, forcing his racing heart to slow. He half expected blood to start dripping from the ceiling, or ghostly whispers to crawl into his ear. He opened his eyes. Nothing. The room was normal. The broken glass from the coffee table was still there, but there were no bloodstains. It was an illusion, a psychological attack. They were trying to drive him out or drive him mad. Remembering something from an old case file, an idea, a desperate gamble formed in his mind. He clasped his hands together, his knuckles white. He spoke to the empty room, his voice shaking but clear. If you are spirits bound to this place, I apologize for my intrusion. I'm only here to find the truth about what happened in apartment 2402. If you have been wronged, if you have a story that needs to be told, tell me. If there is anything I can do to help you find peace,
I will do it. I swear. As soon as the words left his lips, the lights flickered violently. The first ghost, Ilara, materialized before him, her form clear and solid. Blood dripped from a phantom wound on her neck, and when she spoke, more blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, staining her white dress. Get out. Her voice seethed with pain and fury. Get out of this place if you want to live.
The sight was petrifying. Caleb shut his eyes tight, bracing himself. Just then, Serafina appeared beside him, a calming presence in the storm of terror. Caleb slowly opened his eyes again. Ilara had vanished. The room was quiet. The clock on the wall read exactly midnight. He looked at Serafina, his hands still clasped as if in prayer. If you have a grievance, please share it with me. I will do everything in my power to see that your souls can rest. Serafina materialized fully before him, her kind eyes welling with spectral tears. I don't mean you any harm, she said. If I did, Ilara wouldn't have let you live this long. She is protective. When you walked in here and we saw that you could see us, I knew you were sent here for a reason, to help us find justice for the hatred in our hearts. Tell me, Caleb whispered. Tell me what happened to you. And so, as the city slept below, Serafina began to tell their story, a story that made Caleb's blood run cold.
It happened 4 years ago, she began. This apartment wasn't a home. It was an illegal, underground plastic surgery clinic, run by a cosmetic surgeon named Dr. Alistair Finch. He was famous, the kind of doctor women sought out to perfect their beauty. Ilara and I, we were best friends. I was married, with a beautiful 2-year-old daughter. Ilara was single, beautiful, wealthy. She came here for breast augmentation. I wanted a tummy tuck after my pregnancy. It was supposed to be a secret, a simple procedure. They set up the whole apartment like a clinic. We were taken into separate bedrooms, separate operating theaters. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly. But then, near the end of my procedure, there were complications. I started convulsing. Dr. Finch and his young assistant, Dr. Marcus Thorne, tried to stabilize me. Blood was coming from my mouth. Thorne panicked. He told Finch they had to get me to a hospital. But Finch, he refused. He screamed that if we were moved, they'd all go to prison. In the other room, Ilara was also in distress. She was having trouble breathing, her skin turning blue. Thorne ran to Finch, telling him it was happening again. By the time Finch got to her room, her heart had already stopped. He tried a shot of adrenaline, but it was too late. It only sealed her fate. Back in my room, my own body was failing. I convulsed one last time, and then I was still. In the space of an hour, both of us were gone. 2 dead patients in an illegal clinic. Thorne wanted to report it, to take us to the hospital and say we died on the way, but Finch was cold, calculating. He said no. This clinic didn't exist. There was no license. If we were found, his life was over. He paid off the 2 young nurses who were assisting, gave them $50,000 each, and threatened them with prison time if they ever spoke a word of it. They fled in terror. Then, he and Thorne began to erase us. They packed up all the medical records, our purses, our phones, everything. and drove out to a deserted embankment far from the city and burned it all. But that still left the problem of our bodies. Seraphina's voice faltered, heavy with an ancient, unbearable pain. They couldn't just carry us out. The security cameras, the weight. So Finch decided on the only solution he could see that would guarantee their freedom.
He told Thorn they had to dismember us. Caleb felt sick. They did the unthinkable, Seraphina continued, her form flickering. They separated our bodies into parts. They removed our bones and placed them in 2 large ceramic urns. The rest they packed into suitcases and disposed of in the river, scattered so we could never be found. After that monstrous act, they returned here to rest and plan the final cleanup.
That night, they both had the same nightmare. They dreamt we returned, our bodies pieced back together but still bleeding, and we choked the life from them. They woke up screaming, with real bruises on their necks. Our spirits were already here. They worked frantically after that, removing all the medical equipment and having normal furniture delivered. And the urns, our bones, they cut a hole in the plaster of the living room ceiling, placed us inside, and sealed it up, painting over it as if nothing was ever there. Then they fled, starting the rumor that the apartment was haunted to keep anyone from ever looking too closely. Caleb stared up at the pristine white ceiling. "You're telling me your bones are still up there?"
Yes, Seraphina whispered, and no one has ever been able to see us. Until you. The protective charms they placed on the urns must have finally faded. Please, Caleb, all we want is for our remains to be returned to our families. We want justice. Just then, Ilara's spirit appeared beside Seraphina, her expression now one of sorrow, not rage. "Tell my mother, I have always loved her," she pleaded, her voice cracking with spectral grief. "Tell her I'm so sorry I didn't listen to her." Seraphina looked at Caleb, her eyes full of a mother's longing. "And my daughter, I just want to know that she's growing up happy. That's my only wish." Their forms began to fade. Caleb was left alone in the silent, desecrated room, the weight of their story pressing down on him like a physical thing. He had his answer. Now he had a promise to keep. A sharp knock on the door jolted Caleb from his thoughts. It couldn't be. The spirits had just faded. Was there another entity here? Some other force at play? He took a deep, steadying breath and called out, his voice firm. "Who's there?" Silence. He moved cautiously towards the door, listening intently. A thick, viscous liquid, dark as blood, began to seep under the door, pooling on the pristine floor and soaking into his leg of jeans. This felt different. This felt real.
"Who is out there?" Caleb demanded, his voice laced with aggression, born from a night of terror. "Answer me." A gravelly, muffled voice came through the door. "You need to leave. This is our house. Get out now, or you'll stay here for good." Caleb's blood ran cold. That wasn't a ghost. That was a living, breathing person. He grabbed the heavy-duty Maglite flashlight he packed. It felt more substantial than a weapon, and he slowly turned the deadbolt. He wrenched the door open. A dark figure darted away from the door, sprinting toward the fire escape stairwell. Acting on pure adrenaline, Caleb gave chase, but by the time he reached the heavy steel door, it had slammed shut. and he could hear the distinct sound of it being barred from the other side. Who was that? A person or a ghost? The line was becoming terrifyingly blurred. He returned to apartment 2402, the sense of fear now replaced by a grim determination. It was past 2 in the morning. He would wait until sunrise and go straight to the police. But how could he make them believe him? Telling them a ghost story would get him a one-way ticket to a psychiatric ward. He needed proof. Knock, knock, knock. The sound came again, sharp and aggressive. Caleb stepped towards the door, flashlight held high. Before he could even open it, the door burst inward with splintering force. A heavy object swung through the air and connected with the side of his head with a sickening crack. Pain exploded behind his eyes, and he crumpled to the floor, the world dissolving into a constellation of black and white stars. 2 figures rushed into the room, their faces grim in the dim light. It was Dr. Alastair Finch and Dr. Marcus Thorne. They had heard someone was staying in their old clinic and, fearing their dark secret was on the verge of being discovered, had come to silence the witness permanently. They dragged Caleb's limp body and dumped him onto the sofa. Their plan was simple. Stage it to look like the haunted apartment had driven him to a fatal accident.
He must have seen something, Thorne stammered, his hand shaking. What do we do?
We finish this, Finch said, his voice cold as ice. Another victim of the ghost. As Finch raised the metal pipe to deliver a final fatal blow, a chilling voice echoed through the room. Give us back our lives. Both men froze. Standing before them, floating just above the floor, was the spectral form of Ilara. She was no longer just a sad vision. She was a figure of pure, righteous fury, her body crisscrossed with the phantom cuts from their instruments. "You monsters!" she shrieked, her voice the sound of tearing metal. "Give us back our heads." Then Seraphina appeared beside her. They advanced on the 2 men, who were now paralyzed with a terror beyond reason. "Monster! A ghost!" Thorne screamed, his face ashen. He turned and bolted, scrambling out the door and towards the stairwell in a blind panic. Finch, his arrogant composure shattered, was right behind him. The spirits of Ilara and Seraphina flew after them, ethereal wraiths of vengeance. In his haste, Finch's expensive leather shoe slipped on the top step of the concrete stairwell. He tumbled end over end, his head hitting the unforgiving steps with a series of sickening thuds, until he lay in a crumpled, unconscious heap on the landing below. Thorne never looked back. He just kept running.
When the first rays of morning sun cut through the apartment's large window, Caleb stirred. His head throbbed with a blinding pain. The memory of the attack came flooding back. He painstakingly sat up, his vision swimming. For a moment, he couldn't separate reality from the nightmare. After a few minutes of steadying himself, he began to pack his gear, his movements slow and deliberate. He paused, lit 3 sticks of incense he kept in his paranormal kit for cleansing, and placed them in a glass on the mantelpiece. "Don't worry," he whispered to the silent room. "I will get you justice, I promise." Back in his own apartment, he began the disheartening task of checking his footage. If he had captured the images of Ilara and Seraphina, it would change the world. But as he feared, all the cameras that had recorded the supernatural events were corrupted, showing nothing but static. His heart sank, but then he remembered the camera he had thrown, the one that had smashed the coffee table. Its casing was cracked, The lens shattered, but the memory card was intact. He plugged it in. The footage was glitchy and distorted, but it was there. It clearly showed Finch and Thorne storming in. It showed them striking him down, and, most importantly, the microphone had perfectly captured their dialogue. "Another victim of the ghost," Finch's cold voice said, clear as a bell. It was the proof he needed.
He immediately contacted the Chicago Police Department. He didn't lead with the ghost story. He led with the assault, the recording of two men breaking in and confessing their intent to stage his murder. He told them the motive he overheard them discussing was to cover up a previous crime committed in that apartment involving two missing women from 4 years ago. That was enough. Detectives were dispatched. The video was a solid piece of evidence for a warrant. Upon searching apartment 2402, they noticed the telltale signs of a patch job on the ceiling. They cut it open. Inside, they found 2 ceramic urns filled with bone fragments. Forensics confirmed the remains belonged to Ilara Vance and Serafina Gable, 2 women reported missing 4 years prior. Finch, recovering in a hospital bed under police guard, and Thorne, apprehended at his home, were arrested and charged with double homicide.
Weeks later, Caleb attended the memorial service. The remains had been returned to their families after 4 long years of agonizing uncertainty. Serafina's daughter, now a bright-eyed 6-year-old, was beautiful, just like her mother. Caleb found Ilara's mother, a woman aged by grief, and spoke to her quietly. "Mom, I don't know how to explain this, but I feel I have a message for you. She wants you to know she's sorry she didn't listen, and she has always loved you." The woman stared at him, her eyes wide with shock and a glimmer of understanding. How could you know that?" "I'm just the messenger," Caleb said softly, before quietly taking his leave. He felt a profound sense of peace settle over him.
That night, Caleb had a dream. Ilara and Serafina came to him, not as terrifying specters or tragic victims, but as radiant, peaceful souls. They looked happy, free from their pain and anger. They bowed their heads to him in a final silent thank you, then turned and walked into a gentle, welcoming light, fading from view forever. Caleb smiled in his sleep, his own long night of terror finally over.